Some might argue you settled with the city of Kenosha already. What do you hope to achieve by trying to get a public inquest? What would that really achieve? The statute of limitations has run out for criminally prosecuting any of the officers involved?
And I'm not sure that that's absolutely correct, all right? I use an example right here in the city of Milwaukee. In 1958, there was a landmark shooting of an African-American man named Daniel Bell. And 21 years later, the officers were charged. They had lied under oath about planting a knife, and that came to light, and E. Michael McCann actually wiretapped the officers, and it was a landmark civil rights case. And so questioning the statute of limitations, I'm bothered by that. And I've hired some of the finest attorneys in the state of Wisconsin, and they are telling me that the statute of limitations don't even really start until you discover the crime. And then as long as they perpetuate it, that is continuing fulfillment of that. So we didn't even discover that the crime occurred until about 2012. So even though that we had a civil rights settlement and we used those funds to change the law about 2012, 2013, that's when I approached the FBI and said, you have a problem. These officers lied under oath, and here's the evidence. And I tell everybody, just like in the Bernie Madoff case, the SEC investigated Bernie Madoff 3 times, and they cleared him of all wrongdoing. And so we created this video to show people, and it's called Forensically Impossible, the Anatomy of a Police Cover-Up. We created this video so that people can come in and see exactly what had happened. And these aren't something that we fabricated. These are the forensic analysis and the depositions of the police officers and how they just don't add up.
So is your goal to expose what you believe was a cover-up, or is it to get murder charges filed in your son's death?
Our goal is to know the truth. I don't know if you have any children, but if you lost a child, especially the way we lost a child, he was killed in front of his mother and sister with a gunshot wound directly to his head, and there was some false narratives that were created by the police department. We want to know the truth, and so that's why we've been pushing. And I've been unrelenting for 13 years. And even though we've made a tremendous amount of progress, we got the law passed, I've testified in front of the President's task force, all those types of things, we still don't know the truth of what occurred.
Well, let's talk about that. You kind of have a contradictory relationship with people of power. We have these images of you shaking hands with Governor Scott Walker when the bill was passed requiring outside agencies to investigate fatal officer-involved shootings, which sets the standard now throughout the state of Wisconsin. And yet, you seem to have irked a fellow Republican, Brad Schimmel, the Attorney General, who accuses you of using his statements that he conveyed to you out of context to promote this push for a public inquest.
I met with the Attorney General. My attorney and I, Pat Dunphy from a civil rights case, met with the Attorney General and his Chief of Criminal Investigations, O'Keefe. And we had some discussions. And one of the things that I advised the Attorney General of, and he told me it was perfectly fine for me to do that, was a public awareness push to ask him to reopen the investigation. And at one point, he finally released a letter saying, you know, I agree with Mr. Bell that the officers might have lied, that the officers may have mistaken Michael Bell grabbing for a gun and everything, but I'm not going to do anything about it. So I think that I'm playing by the rules. I think that I'm not standing in the street, you know, stopping traffic or anything like that. I'm playing by the rules that I'm allowed to do. If they don't like it, I don't know what else to do. I mean, how else does one change and make progress in an investigation like this? So,
did the Attorney General really say he wouldn't do anything about it? He couldn't help the case involving your son, Michael Bell Jr., but he did dedicate himself to thorough investigations of future officer-involved shootings. He did express that sentiment.
He did, but I once again, I believe that there was a, so what we ended up trying to do is maybe not open an investigation. Let's have a public hearing on the matter. And that is in the form of a public inquest. And if you take a look at Wisconsin Statute 979-04, it says that if a death is suspicious or unexplained, you can have a public inquest. So we approached the district attorney down in our region saying, we want to discover the truth. Please hold a public inquest. And that's what we're asking for now.
Okay, so this was presented several months ago now.
The public inquest was requested after the Attorney General issued his letter. I'm looking at these statements from Attorney General Schimmel, and if you want, I've sent you a copy of our ad. And there are so many strong statements saying that Michael Bell did not need to die. That Michael Bell, the officers at best were mistaken of the facts, at worst they've lied. And when I have those types of statements from the Attorney General saying that there's a problem here, that is allowing me to push further, because now I have the top law enforcement officer in the state saying there's a problem with this case. He does tell me that he can't do anything about it because of statute of limitations and perjury, and I think that he's trying to have both sides. He's trying to sound like the concerned public official, but then he doesn't want to stand up and do the right thing.
All right, so since this, several months ago, since these communications, you've had other entities reach out to you that you feel are just as significant.
Well, in May of this year, we had, I, along with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Law School and the S.C. Johnson Foundation at Wingspread, held a conference and where the National Transportation Safety Board, the Harvard Medical School, and the director of one of NASA's recording branches came out to speak with law enforcement about an external learning model where law enforcement could gain insight and improve themselves and reduce the number of police-related fatalities. And so I'm in communications with a number of those people, and just today I shared with you that the director of the Police Executive Research Forum said he met with the National Transportation Safety Board in Washington after our meeting here in Racine, and that he feels that it's a very powerful way to improve law enforcement.
So an NTSB style-like investigation.
That's right.
There's an overall standard. Everybody has to share the information with each other.
And NTSB, what they do is they look at the investigation and they try to discover the true facts. And after everything's over with, they look at everything that contributed to the fatality. And then they issue non-binding recommendations. And those non-binding recommendations could be in a whole number of things. My own son's case, we feel that the officer who wore a gun that had a holster that was shaped kind of like a cane, which probably hooked on the mirror on my son's car.
Yeah, the side mirror.
On side mirror.
The driveway of your own home.
The design of that weapon holster contributed to the death of somebody. Now, in the NTSB, they would go back and say, can we redesign this holster so that it might not be misinterpreted that somebody's taking that weapon and therefore save somebody's life? That is what the NTSB-style learning model does, and right now law enforcement does not have a learning model like that. They do not have a database to store those lessons, and they do not have a way to disseminate those lessons amongst other law enforcement agencies. I had lunch last year about this time with Sheriff David Mahoney in Dane County, and I personally asked him, I said, if you learn a lesson within your department where a citizen died, do you share that with other departments? And he said no. And so that's why in the military, in the aviation, we learn a lesson, we immediately share it amongst everybody to bring that accident rate down, to bring that fatality rate down, but that doesn't happen in law enforcement.
On that night, on November 9th in 2004, the speculation as you present in your video is that the officer was mistaken that his gun was taken. The holster had actually been moved by the side mirror. And I have to ask you, though, do you forgive the officers involved?
I think the officer made an honest mistake.
Thinking his gun had been taken.
I am a military officer. I've been in combat scenarios. I know that you do the best that you can in these wartime moments. But the problem that I had, instead of revealing the truth, that the officer made an honest mistake, the department decided to play it another way, and that is to cover up the true facts and hide it. And that's where, when you look at that video, Forensically Impossible, the anatomy of a police cover-up, you will see that a lie just kept compounding itself until it forced them to settle with us in a civil rights settlement.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you forgive the shooting but not the lie that you say happened afterwards.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct.
What would you say to people who go, if only Michael had not resisted?
and if you go back and look at the video, you will see that my son did nothing wrong. He drove a car perfectly straight. He stopped in front of his own home and got out. But you know, on the other hand, there are people that resist all the time, and what was the resistant? I mean, he was being tased and he was being kicked and he was being beaten. He had 44 contusions on his body. His mother and sister watched a Rodney King-style beating occur in my son's backyard. And so that's what I say to that, is that law enforcement's encounter people all the time that sometimes aren't compliant. If you tase them and you raise that level of non-compliance even higher, then they have to deal with it. So I don't know if that is an answer that you're acceptable with, but I'm saying that there are people that aren't immediately compliant. If somebody accused you wrongly of an act and you knew that you didn't do it, would you not be resistant also? If somebody came up to you and pointed a gun at you and said, "You're under arrest for robbing the store," you're like, "What? I didn't do that." Well, if you go back to the video, you can see an officer accused my son of running a stop sign and speeding, and it didn't happen. So his first reaction was like, "What? I didn't do that. I know my rights. I didn't do anything wrong." And then, so that's where the story's going.
Local billboards is one thing, a YouTube video is another, but now a buildup of national attention. The Wall Street Journal will be publishing.
It's not the Wall Street Journal, it's the Washington Post.
Okay, so the Washington Post, okay. So tell us about that. So, you know, because I think activism at the local level is one thing. Do you anticipate with the Washington Post publishing what you believe really happened will change things around finally?
It'll bring awareness to the situation. We are probably the only family in the nation that received an award-winning settlement in a civil rights issue and still are able to talk about it. Because in most of those cases, there's a non-disclosure or confidentiality agreement, but I refused to accept that, and the city agreed to settle anyway. I think they just wanted me to go away. If it's this hard for a man with education and resources and being a retired military pilot and being in combat scenarios and have the courage to do these incredible things in high-stress situations, if it's this hard for our family to do, I assure you that a lot of your viewers out there, if it happened to them, they would have to just live with the pain of a broken criminal justice system for the rest of their life, and that happens a lot.
You know, we hear sometimes people say with time they learn to live a new normal after a tragedy. But I have to ask you, with time, when you feel an injustice has been perpetrated, is the wound grow more sore and more intense?
No. You look at it from all different levels, and you understand that I believe that God loves all souls equally, whether you're a police officer or whether you're a person that was involved with a police officer, and so I don't think that, but I do have to keep focused on this, and this does allow the wound to stay open. But you just recognize that people are human and there were mistakes made, and how are we going to improve the system until we really address it.
Now, what will the Washington Post publish, and when is that happening?
I have submitted the full-page ad that we ran in our region, in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, the Kenosha News, and the Wisconsin State Journal. I've submitted that to their legal team for review. And they issued an email last Friday that it has passed their review with just small changes like paid advertisement, and I have to include that it was paid for by the family of Michael and Susan Bell. And we're going to put that in that region because we want people to know that this is how hard it is to get justice. There's a team effort on law enforcement to suppress this type of justice. And we want people to know that to get justice in a case like this, some families have to go to an extreme of taking a $65,000 ad out in a Washington Post to call out what's going on in the state of Wisconsin.
And when do you think that will be published?
It's going to be depending on a number of factors, but I'm estimating probably the third or fourth week in January.
Wow, okay. And what is the next step? Is there a critical meeting that's coming up, or what's the moving forward action, right?
Well,
because it's been out here a while now. I keep hearing you ask for this.
Everybody says, Michael, what are you asking for? And right now we're asking for a public hearing or a public inquest conducted by a special prosecutor to go over the facts of my son's death. I know we're going to have a public showing of the video in Kenosha, not only at the libraries but in the churches.
And when's that coming up?
That's, well, I think I can pull out my phone and show you my calendar dates,
sure.
but it's like the 18th, the 23rd, and the 25th
So
of
it's
January.
all coming up in January, yeah.
I just sent an email to the DA asking him if there was any special rules regarding petitioning, because I'm going to start not only an online petition, but also a public petition, which will be signed at these showings, asking the DA to open an inquest into my son's death. I do have 10,000 DVDs of the video that are going to be sent to registered voters in Kenosha County, and in fact, we've already established that, and those will be Attorney General Schimmel's words will be in that DVD, and it'll be sending people to the public showings, and we're going to be asking for an inquest and a public hearing into this case.
Do you have a certain date when you would like an answer on the public inquest? I mean, you have waited since 2004.
You know, my son's birthday is March 3rd. That would be a good day to get a public answer. And if they don't, then they have to live with the consequences of not doing what is right by the citizens. So.
Okay, anything I didn't ask you that you feel is important to note?
Any talks? I do feel that the comments that were made by Attorney General Schimmel in the letters, I think they were extremely powerful. He criticized the former Attorney General Peg Lautenschlager about not opening up this investigation. I want families to know that one of the methods of law enforcement to wait this out is to say we're conducting an internal review, and then they sit on it for 2 years until the energy is passed, and then they turn around and say we're not going to do anything about it. That is the method that happened here. I not only asked Peg Lautenschlager to do this, I asked former U.S. Attorney James Santel to conduct an investigation. I asked former Attorney General Van Hollen to conduct an investigation. None of them did that. And now I got the current Attorney General saying, well, we can't do this because the statute of limitations ran out. It's like, we have been asking for an investigation for the last 13 years, and now you're telling me you can't do it because the statute of limitations ran out. And a lot of people within law enforcement know that the Attorney General has enough power to do this. He can hold a public hearing. He can do what's right by the public.
So you want the Attorney General Schimmel to reverse his earlier comments and open an investigation?
Or authorize a public hearing into the matter. Or authorize the District Attorney of Kenosha County to hold a public inquest into the matter. We want a public showing of what's going on here.
What's it like living in Kenosha now?
Well, in the beginning, I was a hated man. I stood up for what I believe was right, and I was a hated man. How dare I question the authority of the police? And I used to tell everybody that back then 95% of the people were against me and 5% of the people were for me. But if you take a look at, like on our video on Facebook, there's 58,000 views and there's hundreds and hundreds of comments. And I would say that 98% of those comments are all in support of what we're doing now versus 2% that are against me. So that's the change that occurred in the last 13 years. We didn't have cell phones and YouTubes and Facebook back when I started this. I had to do everything by fax and by newspaper print ads, but this has allowed us to move forward. So.
All right. Thank you very much.
I am so grateful that you took the time to do this.
Oh, no. I'm very interested in the story.
Okay.
I really want to know what happened, too. Everybody does.
I am so grateful that you took the time to do this, because I can assure you that if it wasn't for people like yourself and like A.J. Bayatpour and Gina Barton and a number of other people along the way, and many people right here from your own, from CBS 58, that we've never gotten this far. And all I can just tell you is that I'm really, really grateful that you're doing this. So, and
It's our job. Oh, sorry you lost Michael this way.
I know, but you know, I think he's got. I'm fortunate enough to have three other sons, the other. So I almost think that it was my mission that if I, thank you, you're understanding my emotions, and I don't think most fathers would fight as hard as I have, and so. And he wasn't, you know, the most fantastic boy in the whole world. He wasn't the worst boy in the whole world. He was just my boy.